normal town, but
So why, so just to circle back one last little bit, why does Leibniz, is it the monadology of Leibniz that you're going for? I mean, I'm not clear about the Leibniz move.
the Leibniz is the infinitesimal, what I borrowed from Leibniz is the notion of infinitesimal subdivision, which prevents the reaching of a limit, prevents the reaching of zero for good.
But isn't that true that that is what a dimension does? That the term dimension invokes the fact that there's not a limit, that there's a limitless limit, as it were. That because if you think about a dimension, where are the edges to the dimension? They don't exist.
No, what I find interesting there with Leibniz is that taking away the zero as a very sharp separation prevents, maybe Leibniz wasn't that because then Latin wants God to come back into the picture, but gives us a good way into the breaking down the separation between material world experience and abstract principles that are outside of it, out of time absolute, absolute laws and rules, which are supposed to be there before time and organizing everything. Because to exist as separate like that, they need to be clearly cut out. And instead, if they can never be approached fully, then the whole distribution that is put in place with an a priori and experience cannot stay together.
Okay. Any question? Because I want to now move on to, because you're going to present on third dimension, right? Two. Oh, you're doing two. Okay, that's good. So this, are we ready to move to the second dimension? I say to the audience on this side. Yeah? You ready? Okay, go for it. Because I want to see if we're going to, you've been running in and out, so you might have missed like some of the stuff that they've done. Well, don't worry about whether or not it links to what Matteo was saying. What were you originally going to talk about?
I suppose that, I mean, I think that's too much, but I was thinking about how time works as a dimension.
Okay, let's go with it.
About, because, I mean, what Einstein did was he geometrized space-time, space-time, not just geometrization of space and time. It's a thing in itself. And that geometrization is, you know, it's curved, it's got, it just shows again that there's no real sort of edges or.
So he then disposes of the Euclidean forms of, let's say, geometry.
There's no absolute frame of reference. There's no or. Well, there's no origin. Well, there's no. But it's multiple frames of reference. There's different space-time grids which overlap. There's no real.
So what is the advantage of moving from, let's say, a square or an angle, or a triangle or a rectangle, that kind of thing, to a curve? What's Einstein's, what was that brilliant, why was that such a weird thing that he ended up realizing that you could stay with geometry, but you had to get rid of the line, or you had to understand that a line was never straight? What was his thing there?
I suppose I'd say it's the lines that, because it can't be straight, it's always affected by something. It's always.
And what is it always affected by? What was Einstein's affect to the line?
Gravity.
Gravity. And why did gravity make it curve? What was the thing? I mean, because Einstein's the one that explains why the Earth is round as opposed to triangular. And why is the Earth round and not triangular?
It's got a center, it pulls things in evenly.
Yeah.
Correct.
So the dimension that Einstein's talking about requires at least this field called gravity. So we get far away from width, height, volume, and we start talking about these laws. Energy, mass, speed.
And sort of a coherence without an absolute.
And this becomes part of the second dimension. Can you elaborate? Yeah. Can anyone do it? Steve, you want to try? Aren't you glad you showed up, Steve?
So,
See it.
not now. With an obvious thought, maybe. Give me a time.
Yeah. Is this,
Why? What? The notion that the time and space and things become about the way that they all interrelate. With this kind of the idea that there's a maximum speed, so that things have to relate in a certain way. Why does that become a second dimension?
Why, or put it slightly differently, if the way in which we're talking about one dimension starts with this question of Euclidean geometry, and then the abandonment of that, and then certain different ways of bringing in this infinitesimal move to get rid of the ground, we know that, and Frank brought up the point of intention, but in fact one could say there's something else pulling. And for Einstein, of course, it's gravity. It's not going to be intention in that sense.
Well, okay. And the system that was one-dimensional contains its own rules that create a dimension within it.
Okay, good.
Somehow.
Good. So that's your surface. That's
Yeah. Does that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
make
That's
sense?
one.
But then I suppose you've got the interaction of those things within this, what was a one-dimensional thing that interact, and the relative nature of that interaction could be the second dimension.
Okay, we're getting somewhere.
Possibly.
And that the stuff that starts to interact is what?
Are the dimensions that you base your the
Don't
relative
use the word dimension in
the
there.
relative interaction, shall we say, is the measure by which you get your second dimension.
Okay, we're warm. It's a little
But,
circular yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Energy?
Yeah, it is got to do with energy, it's got to do with gravity, it's got to do with these kind of problems.
Are we talking specifically about that, or more kind of metaphorically about
No,
a system
specific.
like
Specifically,
about
gravity.
what?
Specifically, speed.
Oh, okay.
Specifically. So what we're trying to think about is if the first dimension, or one dimension, is already an articulation that requires two dimensions minus, let's say, something in order for it to be the one dimension. So it's always, in Deleuzian world, it's n minus 1. So you always get, you always have the something that is that something is taken away. So you were right about that one aspect of it. It's just not the intention that's taken away. Something else is taken away. Well, that something else that is present is going to be a law of something. Law of gravity, law of velocity, something.
Is it
Time.
E equals mc squared? Isn't
Well,
it?
of course it's E equals mc squared, but that's not necessarily two-dimensional. Well, when I say of course, what I mean is that this thing that is mass, velocity, and so on, and energy, these are relative in the sense you can put different variables in, but they form the attraction. The attraction, the equal sign is that.
So they do that round thing.
They do that round thing. Yeah, they do that round thing that creates the curve.
Mhm.
So the second dimension involves laws of gravity, of speed, of energy, of light, of time. Second dimension, not in the Euclidean world, but in the world that, the groundless grounds world that we're dealing with, the technological world, you have different form of dimension. So the second dimension is going to be involving, which you're right to point out, these ways in which speed, times, and so on interact.
I was going to say, with general relativity field equations, they're not They're not really absolute. You can plug in any sort of numbers and you can build a sort of a coherent universe. There's not one absolute universe.
So second dimension does what that third dimension either doesn't do or does differently? What is the second
It
dimension?
has attraction. It has
Okay,
like
polarities.
yeah.
I'm saying these polarities involve some kind of movement, some kind of energy, something like that. And why is it second dimension and not, I don't know, 11th dimension? Why is it being called second dimension?
Would it be possible to say that the second dimension is the emergence of the laws of coherence, whichever they are? So the first dimension is that there is something rather than nothing, and that the second dimension that something holds together in one form or another. And when I say one form or another, it's not because I am generic. It's that precisely because there isn't a background that will organize it, the one form or another is specific to that field, to that system, is internal to it.
Would you agree with that, Dave?
Not sure. So I know with general relativity, you've got. I mean, it's not like your position and my position come together, and there's no relation at all. They always follow a sort of a mean motion, a mean speed, or something which relates them. But it's not an absolute. It's not a closed. It's always still frayed around the edge that can go either way.
Mm-hmm.
But it still holds itself together.
So if we said that, let's just say, I'm not saying this is correct, let's just take it as it is correct for this PhD seminar today. Okay, we're just gonna put it, so that first dimension means this way in which one starts articulating the something as opposed to the nothing. And not as opposed to the nothing, the something as able to be present. So it articulates a present. And the present is no longer established in terms of the Euclidean move, it's established in terms of, let's just for the sake of the argument, the Leibnizian in forward move, so that this move of putting things in relationship to an infinite Mobius moment. And that if you start with that, then you can take away, you can say that then if you take away the ability to make sense of it, then you're in the first dimension. That's how I understood your notion of observation. So the second dimension immediately is the making sense of that first dimension. Is that fair? Okay. That, from the perspective of the first dimensional move. But the second dimension from the perspective of from the analytic position of saying, let's start with second dimension, from a whole different analytic platform, that second dimension requires the laws of gravity, the laws of, some other laws that start coming into the play. So you start getting speed, time, whatever, and that becomes the field of the second dimension, which is still a type of surface, just this surface is activated in a dynamic way that includes aspects that we're more familiar with, gravity, time, so on and so forth. Yeah? Is that fair?
Yeah. I became very, very suspicious of the expression surface, which I loved until a couple of days ago, because...
You loved the surface until a couple of days ago. Don't listen to him, Steve. His whole thesis on Thursday.
Not the surface as a concept, but the very word surface. Because it's so much still recalls a depth that we are trying to move away from. That and instead the surface has very, very rigorous laws. It stays together very seriously. It's not just floating about.
It's not this amoebic.
Exactly. So no, I keep every time I pronounce in my mind surface, I have to also add it is a a rigorous, coherent set, and it's not just a sheet of paper taken off something else.
Okay.
Um,
But if you think of it, in a kind of etymology, can't say that word,
Etymological.
sense, then it's surface. It's like on the face, isn't it? It's like what does it sort of makes sense more.
I don't know, but is this the etymology?
it's over the face, yes, but maybe, well, I don't know. But that's precisely what I'm saying. The surface is not on the top of something else.
No, it's part of it as well, but
It is.
It just
It
is
is,
the is.
yeah,
It just
It's not
is.
flat.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not flat, it has depth, but it's not depth as one
No,
would
it is, folds,
understand it.
articulations of sort. I mean, because it's not spatial.
So in the digital environment, which is what you're working in, the algorithms that you're suggesting, on the one hand, in relationship to creating the screen formation, and on the other hand, the ways in which one is dealing with drawing, because what Steve is working on is the way in which one takes the notion of drawing as in fine art world and replays it in an algorithmic environment, basically.
Yeah.
So, and in that way, you're saying that drawing isn't just taking a mouse and, doing like so on the so-called screen. That is like a very limited sense of drawing. That the fine art, or the artist move there is the fact that the algorithm itself creates a surface around which the tool, in this case, whatever it happens to be, the interface you're using, melts or has an intersection together, and that creates something else on the surface, right? And that something else on the surface is two-dimensional,
Yes.
okay? So that's something else on the surface, which in order to create it had to do with speed, had to do with electricity, had to do with intensity, had to do with algorithms. These are all part of what creates this infection and affection. It's affected and infected, as it were. It's viral in the way it operates. And that becomes a 2D surface in technological terms or in digital terms. It's, so what's being said in Groundless Grounds, in this book Groundless Grounds by Lee Braver, and what's being said, or anyway being claimed to be that Heidegger's bringing in and Wittgenstein and that crowd, is that they're thinking through in Wittgenstein's way mathematically, and in Heidegger's way he's doing it via rethinking this relation between existence and being, and that they're trying to set up a dynamic that creates an unsayable something that makes something get produced. And that unsayable something isn't just totally unsayable, just going, I don't know what to say. It's actually moving beyond the singular dimension that we started with in terms of how we started out with your remarks. If that's true, then the real question becomes, is there a 3-dimension in a digital algorithmic environment? Would you say that there is? And if there is, what does it look like? I mean, could you have a 3-dimensional environment that isn't in or on the screen? That is an algorithmically produced.
You mean that it isn't visualized in that form?
It's not visualized in that form. Is there a 3rd dimension that is an algorithmically created 3rd dimension? Knowing that we're talking about dimensions now
In the sense that...
in this algorithmic sense. I don't know.
I'm just thinking, is it because we're...
Is it 4 o'clock?
Is it time for tea? I was wondering, is it because we're dwelling on the visual, and maybe it is to do with sound? Is that where the Ed has gone now? But I'm sure he would have said something.
It's the clue in the word interface, because it's like it's inside it, but it's part of it as well. It's sort of...
What's a hologram? Does holograms have anything to do with this, you think?
Yeah.
Would a hologram be 3-dimensional?
Oh, that's a tricky one. That's
so
really
there's
tricky.
like non-localizable aspects of things.
Yeah, and what does it mean to talk about a non-localizable something?
Well, it gets into sort of coherence. So things working at different scales. I mean, in this book, she's talking about.
Which book is this?
This is the Rainbow and the Worm, the Physics of Organism.
The Rainbow and the Worm. Who did that?
May Wan Ho.
Oh, yeah.
I got this out again because Gianna mentioned negentropy, which I mentioned last week, and so I was just going to refer back to it in here. So in here, she then sort of starts talking about this Schrodinger's cat thing, or negative entropy. But the thing is, it seems to relate to like notions of free energy. Well, the thing is that she's talking about in terms of this non-localizable aspect is sort of, instead of entropy where it's sort of dissipating or going towards an equilibrium or something, there's the aspect of a system that has capacity for energy storage, and that's through kind of on a sort of biophysical level, sort of kind of complex coherence in throughout different levels of the system playing off each other. That it has this other aspect of, well, this other aspect of capacity that can, which is sort of this delocalizable aspect. I did try and pull out some quotes.
So would you say the third dimension then invokes some form of location, including the non-locatable?
Well, it seems like there's kind of like there's matter, but there's energy flows, and there's kind of affects, there's events through that process, and it's the sort of this event relates to the sort of this other kind of capacity. So it's the event, one event or transformative event plus another event produces these sort of different events at the scale, this across this sort of micro to macro scale.
So far what you've said is it's interesting, but it's descriptive. So I'm trying to get an analytic position around 3 dimensions.
Well, it's just this, I find this really sort of, it's like there's loads of dimensions. It's like just sort of
dimensions.
I mean, they're indivisible, so it's like.
So first of all, they're infinitely divisible, and now they're indivisible.
Well, yeah, it's like sort of, I think it's this, I wouldn't say the one, this one, I thought we were talking about this 1D as this indivisible aspect.
No, it's infinitely divisible.
Yes.
Well, it can be infinitely divisible, but there's also a oneness to it, there's an indivisible aspect to it.
And what is that indivisible aspect?
Well, I think that's where it's this capacity for coherence effects across these different levels of matter. So, like.
Okay, we're getting somewhere now. Okay, this is good.
So, should I draw my picture?
Yeah, draw your picture.
Yeah.
Come on here. Bring your picture here.
And then you can tell me more. Actually, no, that's just Euclidean space.
That's right.
You might want to just talk and then
Okay.
can you when I go on it.
Or Jen.
Or June. I'll take the first one.
Thank you. I could show it on the web. I'm not sure whether that's quicker.
No, show it there, this way.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you said about that square and the circle, but what I'm fascinated by is like the sort of symmetries and symmetry breaking. So I'm fascinated by the square that rotates that then makes the circle, and then the circle that rotates that makes the sphere, and then how, when I draw this, you can see that aspect then can create this sort of multi-directional sort of fields, which are sort of infinite, and across those they can be like on and off at the same time. So if we start off with like here, or the square, think let's try and copy pictures. These are I don't know whether it makes sense to try and draw it. Maybe you
Don't
should
keep
continue
erasing
the
it.
conversation.
No, just draw it. Just draw it.
I'll do this. So there's this. So if it rotates, the circle that it fits into, if it's rotated. So then, if I wanted to then just put that in a sphere, I might just put in some more lines. But, so then imagine it's
Good.
oh dear.
No, that's good. That's good. That's
So
good.
then you've got this square rotating in all directions, so you've got a sphere. But then, if you imagine sort of...
So that's a geodesic sphere you've got. That's an odd.
So, but then I like the way how, in terms of this line that's infinitely divisible, well, you could like have like, let's just have like this square here, or we can make another square, so it's sort of, so we're dividing this diameter in half, but we could have divided any point, so you could just get, you've got your infinitely divisible in any direction here. But the thing is, what I think is quite interesting is like where it sort of makes a plane where you add on another sort of, or this square, like, well, you end up with this torus aspect.
And what is that?
It's like a donut.
Can you draw that somehow?
So, say you've got your square was actually a tile, if that was an atom, it was material, or perhaps it was something more electronic in the computer, or perhaps it's more like in the body where it's to do with the biophysics of sort of electrical things jumping and making an energy connection or something. But when it rotates, it can conduct something, say. I don't know, that's just, to just try and get to the, oh yeah, so you've got, yes, oh yeah, that's right. So you have this original square, which is, right, so then I cut it into this smaller square, which I then will just pretend, I'll rotate that square there to make a smaller circle. And then, because I was just going to add another square there, or I could add another square here, but yeah, so I make a circle with that square. So then I ended up with two circles that are meeting at the point, which is quite an interesting point, that point where they meet. It's a bit like if you imagine a diameter there and there, and then you did your infinitesimal cuts. Well, with the point where the two spheres, if these are now two balls, when they met, what would that be? Would that be a zero? I don't know. But then the thing is, say you've got those two squares there, rotating makes spheres. You've got two spheres next to each other that could rotate. But anyway, but then like if you imagine actually that like a donut cut in half, but in this time that's because I did the square there. There's no space in the donut. But if I'd chosen a square up here, but then you can imagine sort of like a form. Or it's this form. You get two circles next to each other, and the circle goes around because. But when that's just a flat circle and that rotates, oh, I can't.
Anyway,
Well, anyway, it's just.
so you're right. Don't give up. This is quite good. This is very good.
Well, anyway, it's just basically it's like imagining a chess. I've just done like 4 squares here, but if you imagine a chessboard, black and white, and then you rotated the chessboard. If you imagine the chessboard has got, it's not just one side of the chessboard, it's two, it's like if you had a chessboard on both sides and then you rotated it, what kind of optical or wiring effects you might get. So you're getting this extra layer of event through the transformation of a sort of, well, in this case, I've sort of drawn it, but you could have done it in 3D. So, like, if I'd actually had a chessboard and I spun it, or maybe that would have an optical effect. Or I'm thinking like moire patterns where you have like 2 nets, and you have, because I happen to have to like, oh, here. I don't think I should try spinning that.
Dane, you want to spin it? Quite a dramatic class.
I think it might be.
Make some room.
That's
I
right.
think you just spin it quite fast. I don't think that.
Yeah, you're very spin very fast.
But you know, like if you, you know, like so just net. But I think it's paralleline stuff because I haven't had this net to keep some insects out from my room at home. But then.
Wait, say that again?
Well, I haven't had net. It's not like net curtains, but just like
That's
black net.
you're scaring me, Lauren.
No, it's just black net.
Black net.
I wanted it over.
Wars.
But because the light's coming through, and because there's 2 layers of it, you start to get all these kind of moire patterns when the net moves. But so what I'm just trying to say is this: how you get these kind of like pattern appears sort of, which is sort of like an animaterial effect. So whether this is like, but I wouldn't reduce that to saying that was 3D or 4D.
Let's start again. So you have this square. You started with your original weird shaped square. Okay.
Yeah, just because I'm trying to draw it.
No, that's right. And so it's kind of, and so you're drawing it so that it is itself never static. Is that
yes,
true?
you
Okay,
can
so
imagine
the
this square.
part of the 3D
So like rotating like this.
includes movement, includes a dynamic feature. The dynamic feature in this case is rotation.
Yes, like with geometry, that there's like affine geometry and projective and something else, and there's probably lots of differential. When I was reading design on this, it was saying that there's sort of like I think it was like the topology geometry or whatever. There's like sort of they could be seen as a sort of hierarchy of like events or transformations which leaves some forms invariant or not, but then depending on that it sort of unfolds the next level. So
We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. Does anybody want to translate that image? Can you just stay up there for a second, Lauren?
I don't know if I can translate the image.
You can
fully,
sit
but
down.
I
Just stay
keep,
up there.
I keep thinking that for this to happen, although this is developed just geometrically, for this to happen, you need.
Don't take that as an insult, Lauren.
No, you need that the third dimension, the dynamism that comes up, is paired, or put in pair with the other side of it, is that the system is open. So it's not concluded or closed or organized by something that pre-exists it. But precisely it does not have that. So I kept thinking while looking at these and thinking of the 2D to 3D in algorithms, of the phenomenon of skeuomorphism that there is in digital photography.
And skeuomorphism.
Yes.
Yeah.
that there is-
Can people? Does everybody know what skeuomorphism is? Steve, can you give a short definition of it so people are on the same page?
Well, in simple terms, it's
Yeah.
when something in the kind of digital world represents something in the real world, I suppose. So-
Analog
Yeah.
technologies. No? So
Yeah.
you have
Thanks.
all contemporary, all use of contemporary photography imitates digitally
yeah,
from
so
film.
if it, yeah.
And so it works backward somehow, or it doesn't do what it could do. Now, to me, that what it could do is the key of these fractal multiplication.
Okay. Can just start again. So start again with the skeuomorphism, so that people can hear this, because it's the first time some people have heard this term. So say it again.
Skeuomorphism is I don't know if it is a pre-existing word or if it has emerged.
It's
digital
emerged. But
technology.
anyway, whatever.
It refers to the use of digital to represent analog technologies. For example, Instagram that takes the old-fashioned pictures through something super
Yeah,
contemporary
like
like before.
hipstamatic.
Or it's
Yeah.
all those,
Yeah.
and there are millions. and so you can add sepia filters to your whatever. No? That's no.
So that's skeuomorphism.
That's skeuomorphism.
Okay.
And somehow I would say that the whole photography has been subjected to that since the beginning because it was skeuomorphic painting in the mind of some people. And
That's
it wasn't-
great.
And it wasn't really
Thank you for
there.
the chapter. Skeuomorphic duck drawing. Anyway.
So the opposite of skeuomorphism is openness.
Mhm.
And that's what the dynamism that Lauren is talking about as somehow a room for happening.
So this is very important. So this form of, let's call it third dimension in this PhD seminar, this form of what we're gonna, let's say generically call dirty theory, you know, because this is not yet cleaned up. So it's just what's happening in this room at this moment. So this kind of theory that you're putting forward, this third dimension, what's being said here is that it basically requires a certain kind of dynamic move that's open. We'll call that third dimension.
Mhm.
But there's other dynamic moves that don't produce something else. And that's going to put it in either 1D category or some other category. Are you saying that?
No, I would. I have the first half of what you said, that the fact that the third dimension is the dynamic of the move, yes. If the bad repetition,
The bad repetition.
no, the skeuomorphism
Okay.
is a conservative move that keeps reactionary move that keeps things as they are.
Okay, can you get that? Can you see that? Yes, Steve?
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean, can you get that, Steve? Actually, yes. I just thought you were going to elaborate. Yeah, go on.
No, does it make sense?
So let's start again. So you're saying that skeuomorphism, just stay with that, creates a moment of closure.
Yes.
And if it creates a moment of closure, it does something different in a third dimensional move, or it's not in the third dimension.
It's
which
not
is
in the third dimension in terms of which we are discussing.
in terms of this digital
Yeah.
moment.
No.
So in a digital technological world, 3D
Mhm.
is not involving a skeuomorphic move, or if it is involving a skeuomorphic move, it's writing a different kind of dimensionality into the picture.
Yes, I mean because 3D is the possibility of new repetition, new patterns emerging.
So your
Is the
position
arrow,
is,
yeah.
so the position around 3D is that what makes something 3D is that it's able to produce something other than itself.
Following what we said.
And is that what you were saying there, Lauren? Were you saying that your little donut and your various spinning things, that the 3D thing, that what makes it 3D is the fact that it has a revolution going on, a movement, a dynamic revolving thing, that ends up being able to create an infinite set of openness, an infinite outwardness, as it were, whereas if one dimension is creating infinite inwardness, as it were, infinite cuts within the cut, within the cut, within the cut.
Yeah, I believe that I wouldn't put them as one inward and the other one outward.
Okay.
I would actually say that they are they act together. I mean, the infinitesimal is the move that breaks down the absolute separation, and
Okay.
therefore it is the openness, because there is no longer a boundary of identity.
But that's the first dimension then.
Yes, but that's why counting them as separate is no longer possible. We are still using this paradigm from the previous one, but it just tricks us more than it helps us.
So what's the use of talking about dimension if in the end of the day it keeps collapsing in on itself? And that really what we're talking about is 3 dimension or 1 dimension or whatever. What's the use of having these positions then? Anyone? Yes, Frank?
So the basis of reality.
Good. So we bring it back to reality. And what is the basis of reality then?
So the way I kind of looked at this,
This being Lauren's thing.
Lauren's in the schematic, and you formalized it. You'd say a dimension is a recursive formula. It is itself minus the next dimension. And at some point in time, you can't get to any further dimension. So dimension 4 equals dimension 4 minus dimension 5, dimension so forth. And if you then did the algebra, you'd end up with something looking like dimension 2 equals dimension 3, and that would be equal, but you know they can't be equal, so there's got to be some other minus something extra, a little minus epsilon. And it's a little minus epsilon, but that's a different epsilon.
No, we're back to the video,
So
sorry.
the epsilon, which is the creation of reality, sort of the convergence point.
So reality is the convergence of the dimensions,
To the extent that we can perceive it.
to the extent that we can perceive it. Anybody wanna, yeah, Danny?
So going back to Einstein.
So yes,
Makes
right.
sense for Lawrence. If the universe is composed of these multiple grids upon which things are organised, so say, it doesn't have to be a square one, but, and these all overlap, and they create this, like, I want to say this moire effect, and does anyone know the shape of the universe? It's a donut, or it's a donut, they call it a fourth dimensional donut, but not even fourth dimensional behind the line. But then and that's sort of created like this, I think, by these overlapping grids. There's not one that defines it. They define it in relation to themselves. They build it up themselves by a coherence. The other thing I was thinking.
Wait, don't go to the other thing yet. Is that,
You can tell it in different ways, isn't?
So again, on simple to just it's this idea of these multiple dimensions. It's almost a pattern their interrelation creates.
good,
That is the physicality of whatever we're talking about. Is that right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
so let's say it again, so give it a go. What's the
So
pattern?
if every particle, whatever, has a pattern to it, it's sort of, it's able to have a relation to other things in the universe. It had its own grid, I guess, but it's not the only grid. It's not the only game in town. Every particle substance has its own grid, and these overlap to each other, and building those up in relation to each other, they start to cohere into something like a universe that can hold itself together, where things can interact, have a sort of relation to each other without
Called reality.
collapsing onto an absolute sort of grid where they are stuck.
Good. Can you repeat it?
Play back.
Very, very often in other instances, you refer to as an economy.
Yes.
When things move and repeat themselves, if to use again an old-fashioned expression, blindly, but then progressively, they gather enough repetition, and then they encounter other forms of repetition. They stick together, they resonate, they crash, they clap, and then this cloud of things, which does not follow a pre-ordered distribution, stays together, and therefore it's an economy, and it's a reality.
Mhm.
Feedback loop of things.
Mhm. And is that a named dimension?
It's an dimension because
Can we call that a dimension or a named dimension? Can we call that a surface, or you like
Yeah, with the
have a nervous reaction to that? An allergic reaction to the fact that we're going to call it a surface. So reality is a surface, and the surface has a depth, and the structure of reality is its dynamic dimensional environments. So far so good? Everybody on the same page? Yeah? Sophie?
Yeah.
Okay. Kate?
Yep.
You've been very quiet. Mark? Yeah? Okay. So, if that's the case, then how does one analytically discuss reality in a useful way, knowing this about the surface? Why we've now spent 2.5 hours and many hours beyond the 2.5 hours painfully going through this kind of thing. What's the use of this?
So Brake's representation
Yes, and how does it break representation?
Well, I suppose, like, representation might be saying, well, that was one, and then that was another one, and that was another one, but then, like, well, we sort of did with all the indivisible bits. So they could all overlap, which seems to break that. But then in another way, they kind of like, it's sort of like, well, if it was a matter of like, that was, could be white or black, or that could be white and black, or this could be white and black. Well, then you could either have the whole black square appearing or a whole white square, depending on the combinatorial order. So when we talked about the contrast between Cartesian and ordinal, that I think that's quite a key aspect with things like this, where if you imagine this as like infinite, then the sort of permutations, if you just limited yourself to the rule of it being black or white, will sort of endless. But then if you make it closed set, like if it was the chessboard, then you end up with a combinatorial order of potentially, so that there's kind of, although there's that kind of aspect to complicate things.
So Alberto, in his introductory remarks, you were saying that you were interested in dimensionality. Okay, and one of the other things we ended, Stuart?
I was just going to say, if we've gone all the way here to talk about difference, is that the...
That's all there is. Let's break out and break the booze and have a ball, right, you know, if that's all.
But yeah, I know it's a bigger word than that, but it's...
No.
No.
Well, yes.
Yes and no.
Well, no,
Yeah,
in the
just
sense that...
capacity thing.
What's
It's
that?
a capacity but difference. If it was closed sets, well, in one way, it's like, even if it was closed, there would be like emergent effects in terms of patterns, which would, I don't know, well maybe those would become combinatorial, so perhaps that would be closed. But if it wasn't closed, then you have got more capacity for difference, I think.
Well, one thing
Well,
to...
it's the notion of the random as well, because like, if you imagine these squares as black or white, well, sort of, in one, like, so if a square is rotating on itself, and then another square is rotating on itself, so there's the sort of, and then across a whole field, it would, so out of some sort of fate, suddenly the whole thing went white. That would be quite rare if they were all just randomly rotating. But that would be if you limited it to the diameter of like 5 squares, or it would be lesser perhaps. But if it was infinite, then and then in all directions, the sort of the capacity for the sort of emergent effects of patterns, or is this where you get patternless data or random effects? Or I'm not quite sure about this aspect of random, whether there really is how. Well, I think there is the random, but on the other hand, there's the kind of like I'm quite confused about like notions of random.
Well, let's not go there for a second. Let's just stay at this. The title of the book that we've been looking at for the last 3 months has been Groundless Grounds. Now, we could say, in fact, that what that is an expression of reality that has no ground. Do you see that? Do you see how that we get to reality in this kind of spinning tops and various other things, but there's no, the structures that are created of reality, in reality, or as reality, are all part of this thing that don't require something for reality to be sitting on top of. So, in fact, what Wittgenstein and Heidegger are doing are explaining your little rotating circles here. We can move off that point, or is that still a point? Is that okay to accept that point? So now we go back to, I'm sorry, we can't
So
move
I think
over.
it's very hard to get from Heidegger to this, because this would seem to be the anathema to what, it's what people have done with Heidegger rather than Heidegger. Because the nothing in Heidegger is the forgetting of being. This brings being back, bam,
Bam.
as metaphysics, but this takes us back
No,
to
this isn't being, this is event.
But this is
Okay, good comeback.
That's exactly what, that's what I'm saying, you've done something with Heidegger. You've taken Heidegger's big being, now created an event out of the Big Bang. But I'm just saying it's
Well, no,
hard
it's
to-
not.
Get off the
An
ropes,
event,
get off the
it's
ropes,
event.
come back onto the ring.
It's not an event, it's an event.
It's an event, good.
Well, then what's that got to do with Heidegger?
Well,
Don't weep.
particularly relating it to Heidegger, because his event isn't quite the event that I'm talking about.
Oh, right.
Because
Okay.
his event is still too sort of all about pulling it back to kind of notions of being, where I'm saying event, I'm not saying becoming, because becoming still sort of like muddies the water and takes you back to this being. So it's this aspect of a depersonal, an impersonal or neutral event, which is I think,
Who's on the ropes now? Mark? Lauren?
Well,
I've always
no, because you can, I mean, I'll just come back. It's not fair.
But while you guys are thinking it, Alberto, now, you started when we went around the room, you said that your work was thinking about dimensionality in painting. Does this speak to you? Or to put it slightly differently, how does this speak to you?
Well, I suppose that the level of my research is mostly about the atmosphere and the sensation of the space, rather than any analytical analysis of this. Like, it will be a kind of listening approach rather than analyzing in depth the difference among myself and the object I'm looking at. So it's like plunging unaware into the image. Like, this image is not really telling me much at first, but for some mysterious reason I give this image the chance to tell me something in the next seconds. So kind of active analytical mind is a bit not completely switched off, but in standby, and I just slowly slide into this field, and then what was an intelligible surface made by incoherent parts slides and gets into something that becomes coherent, kind of, not completely, asymptotically. And then the result is that I dwell into this new 3D impression dimension. And so I found myself a little bit lost in all the analytical aspect of dimensions, because I just kind of think in terms of atmosphere.
Do you have a response to that, Lauren?
well, I think like atmosphere is a sort of.
You think what?
I think notion of atmosphere is something that's interesting.
Is atmosphere, see, the thing is, what I was just concerned about in what you were talking about just now is that I'm worried that we reify the senses by or that there is a possibility of reifying the senses and this kind of atmospheric sensuousness that you're talking about by using this thing called analytic, and the term analytic, and yet I don't see that as being analytic from the point of view of demolishing the senses. I see it as, I guess I'm invoking the term analytic in a very similar way that Lyotard would be using it, like the analytic of the sublime, or even Kant, in the sense that it's a way in which one is able to access the senses that get jettisoned out when one normally talks about dimensions. So, and I think that what you were doing, Lauren, and even in Mark's reactions to it, if it really is talking about reality, then there's no way it can be, or anyway should be, jettisoning out the senses, jettisoning out experience. So to me, what that is actually trying to account for is the way in which this third dimension precisely brings in experience, atmosphere, the sensuous, and so on and so forth. So that's why I would like to see if we can move that, at the moment, looking rather abstract thing, this animal leave on the wall, into a picture, as it were, that is graspable so that it seems able, or in some way deals, exactly what Alberto was referring to start with, which is the way in which an atmosphere gets established. And there, yeah?
Yeah, like an atmosphere might get established, but it's, to me, the ground of the perception, like it's now, it's like that is the first, it's the ground. Like then might be me, that I understand the object, that I see the object or wherever, but to my point of view, it's not a matter of point of view. It's
Right.
a matter of not being separate, detached.
Yeah,
And then afterwards, these things are detaching itself, like automatically. The more that thing is in front of me, and the more I am as well.
So, but what you're saying, what I'm hearing what you're saying, is exactly what that is.
Probably I didn't have the possibility to understand
Yet.
now in real time.
In real time,
Probably
yes,
I
right.
need to-
Oh yeah, that. That's hilarious.
Because there's a lots of translation
Yeah, sure.
that I need to do, like not just
No, I
English
just-
to my mind, but also some kind of vocabulary that I need
Yeah,
to
no.
focus on.
I just, what I'm wanting to be very conscious of here, to make sure that people don't feel left aside, I am so concerned about the way in which science has been abused by, let's say, political environments, so that everything becomes scientistic. And that, so when a word like analysis gets brought in, it immediately invokes this kind of horrible tirade of, ways in which one closes down thinking, or closes down art, really. And one of the tasks, I think, here in the school, and certainly here at the PhD, is to make sure that as artists, or as, people that are dealing with art, however one wants to call it, I would see it from philosophy, but it doesn't really matter on this, for this point, that it's just not in the scientific form. And yet, there is something about it that allows one to be rigorous without being rigor mortis. That's like something that rigor without the rigor mortis, as somebody famous said, I can't remember who it was. Anyway, so that's what I'm concerned about. Is this going to work? We have a big task ahead of us, and the task is to provide a way to counterbalance this scientific thing that's going on right now. I think that fine artists methodologically have this as we know that it's something we can deal with, or it's within our work. How do we put it in the language that we can grasp and understand and use in order that we can go forward? You're right, it takes a lot of translation scenarios, but what I'm hoping that's happening right now is that one is beginning to peel away some of this scientific stuff that's some of the scientific stuff that's going on. That's 10 minutes past. Ignore that.
I better go anyway. Sorry.
Okay, see you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you again very soon.
Any comments on that, or are you
Cheers.
dead?
Doran's event, if I go back to the Heidegger and the being,
Yeah.
back to structure and stuff, but when you equated big B being with the nature of big B being, which this kind of answers to the scientific approach, and then you have the beings, the being is something separate, but then when they use what you're just saying, then you equate the two together, put the two together, which is what has happened, is the accident, that's physics, but big B being and little b beings have come joined up, like that's what it means, what you're saying. But I think, you should be aware of the fact that they get joined like that, and there is a possibility
Yes.
of the harm, because otherwise you start getting things like ethical, within the cause and effect you start getting that this is good, that there's a kind of ethical dimension. When you said sort of like this is conservative and this is open, already it starts to talk to ethical dimensions, because we're like that, where that we're constructed in that whole, as you said, 3 dimensions, not 3 dimensions, classical, we're classical. So we're ethical beings, and there comes an ethical dimension to it. And that's why I say things like, you know, how the image itself, and then how that gives us an ability. Again, I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think we should be aware that that's what's going on, because in the greater outer world, the scheme of things, you know, there are consequences to what you say and do here. This stuff is important because of that ethical dimension and stuff like that, because of that, you know, the way the chips, cookies fall and stuff. And I think that that's important, and that's why I wanted to say this thing, notwithstanding what Lauren would say about, well, it's not a thing, it's nothing to do with hyping and stuff. But I want to say that narrative because it is important that you realise that, you know, that the cause and effect of any kind of understanding, kind of what we do here. I mean, presenting this to other people, this very difficult subject to other people, can make them or break them, maybe, in that way that you know that really difficult problems and really difficult questions have effects on young minds. Put it like that.
Yeah.
So I just thought just keep that on the table.
I agree that it's a side to what we're discussing. It's very, very important. But I see it as I see it as a positive side, or a positive element that is there. The fact that this raises ethical issues. To link it to what Alberto was saying, that I seek and build atmospheres, so I've been thinking of analytical 3D, the second delay terms. And it makes me think, last year we were reading Lyotard about desire, our economies of desire are set in, you know, they counter precisely the traditional layout of the space-time as external. And I always thought that, you know, my position as an artist is not wanting to say something, he's wanting to work. So it's allowing desire to desire, to work on itself. Then, so that's another kind of surface that I as an artist inhabit or build by acting as an artist. The kind of atmosphere that you mentioned, I seek or try to build that atmosphere where my desire can desire.
Do you think, in line with what Mark is saying, and Alberto then, does the seminar think that we should abandon the term analytic? Okay.
But what you're saying is interesting because they're interrelated, the desire to make art and the desire to make sense of your art, don't you think? That the two are just combined, you can't do one without the other, really, sort of.
Yes, but up to a point, because it becomes, you can obviously try to make sense of what you're doing, and then you go back to it and play more with it, and then you again try to make sense of it, and it's a circle on itself. But I have become more and more, not even skeptical, I would really go at war against the attitude that is everywhere now of descriptive art and a descriptive approach.
And how do you mean, what is the descriptive art?
Well, the people that have a project carry it out as an execution of an idea, precisely if they were in an office, and there is no curiosity, there is no risk, there is no experimentation, and they make something that is very boring, at least to me, but I believe it in a certain sense it is boring to them as well, because they are going from the position to the product without dwelling on the making.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
And here I really defend the very, if you like, it sounds like a very old-fashioned position in art, but it can be making, you know, bronze castings or making ephemeral events. One has, I think that one has to work on the pleasure of the making rather than.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
that dirty sensual thing where you're actually making it, where the compulsion comes from the doing.
So,
yeah.
absolutely. So certainly one dimension, if we want to still use this word, of the present or of the work of the artist is desire. Art
You
is
mean
not
the singular dimension?
Yeah.
Okay.
It cannot be, you cannot, you know, givenness needs dimension to give itself. Well, art needs desire. Or happens in the work of desire. this was my take on the other last year.
Okay.
So I think that somehow this the responsibility to what Mark is saying. Hold on. Oh, sorry. To the ethical side that you brought up. It is true that what we are saying can have effects on between quotation young minds, but at the same time, the distribution that exists outside the door has very heavy effects on us and is becoming more and more suffocating. So it is important to me to find, yes, analytic tools, which means in this case very powerful tools to contrast that and to show that we can, actually we should work as artists or citizens in our own completely different lines than the one that we are given as pre-packaged.
So there's then, well, when you say that analytic, is it, it seems like when you say, it would seem to be then, but what's important is how to argue the case in a way that makes the weaker argument collapse, really, or exposes it. Isn't that to be analytic in that sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, exactly. So it just means that it's a way in which one can take a position, and that position is not just one's opinion, that it has some sort of firmer, I was going to say ground, firmer surface. You were going to say something just now.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm really interested in the concept of desire, and I was going to contribute to the seminar by introducing the graph of desire.
The graph?
Yeah.
And what is the graph of desire?
Well, I thought it, but because I haven't gone into it, I realised that the notion of dimensionality is a lot more complex than I grasped last week. But it's a graph with 4 axes.
Can you draw it?
Which has dynamics that allow us to understand sort of inside-outness. So
It's all right. Let me draw it again a little bit.
So it has 2 kind of, I think of them as pieces of material or physicality. I think of this one as the body,
Okay.
and this is culture.
Okay.
And then the graph itself is Lacan's famous stitch, which knits them together. So it has movement that goes like that.
And this is not his quilting point.
This is his quilting point, it is. And I read it, but this is a very kind of peculiar reading of it, which opens it up in a useful way, I think, is to sort of see the different dynamics at work, which is these dimensions. So I think this horizontal dynamic, left-right, figures going back and forth. And this vertical dynamic is internality and externality, so it's in, out, back, forth. And I think what he's doing is he's taking Saussure's cut between the signifier and the signified, and he's opening it up. I mean, it goes via other thinkers. Jakobson's paradigmatic and syntagmatic axes. Jakobson discovered that people with linguistic disorders, aphasics, either screw up the meaning of particular words or they screw up the word order in the sentence.
And so the famous example was the man who mistook his wife for a hat. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's a very famous version of
Yeah. But I think Lacan kind of takes this cut between signifier and signified, or between culture, big B being and little b beings, and he opens it up into this kind of 3-dimensional thing, which allows us to figure how human beings sort of project stuff out and introject stuff in.
So where does desire, what is desire, and where does it fit in this schematic?
It
What
comes.
do you mean by desire? What do you think Lacan means by desire?
I understand desire as the child's first cry as soon as it's born, which is a need to connect with the other, which you know is sort of charted in this movement, and it connects sort of physically initially with the body, and then it learns to connect linguistically when it learns to speak, the child. And what I think, what I read into this graph of desire is you know, Lacan's famous real, symbolic and imaginary registers. I understand the imaginary to be the realm of iconicity or mimesis, things that mimic other things, where the signifier resembles its object. So that's sort of, for you guys, it's figurative painting or things that look like other things. And the symbolic signifier stands in for its object. But the signifier in the real indicates its object. So I'm talking about 3 types of sign: symbols, icons, and indices. And I think seeing the real in terms of indices kind of opens up a whole huge, well, it just clarifies everything. When people are talking about the real or embodiment or...
And what do you mean by indice there?
By an indice, I can give an example of, it's a shame Grace isn't here because it's the example of somebody being under a blanket.
Oh, I thought you were going to say ectoplasm.
But when somebody's under a blanket, you can't see who they are, so you can't identify them. So they're not operating in the realm of identity. You see, this is Heideggerian identity or representation, and this is difference. The Lacanian real sort of exemplifies difference. And as soon as you enter the realm of difference, you enter the Freudian uncanny, because you have a signifier and you can't relate it to its object, so it's kind of come adrift. So it's pointing with a sort of directness and a compulsion to its object. And so it makes people very sort of attentive. Theatres that use sounds that can't be seen, so, you know, babies crying off stage, or ancient Greek drama which has, you know, murders going on off stage, and you just hear the sort of raw cry of somebody dying, but you can't see what's happening. Freaks audiences out, and horror films use this all the time. And it can be as simple as an unseen knock, because it's a signifier that precedes its object. So it decenters us. And this is the connection that I had with what we were talking about earlier, because you need
Earlier meaning atmosphere?
you need your vision to distance you from something.
Oh, right, yeah, okay. Very early.
Yeah, so if you don't have your vision, but you only have your hearing, you become invaded more. So things get under your skin when you can't see them. They kind of, you feel invaded by them. And it's the disturbance of lip sync. Like, we're saturated by lip sync in contemporary culture, by the conventions of film, which put sounds and images so closely together, falsely, because they're recorded separately, or they used to be, that we're used to sort of synchronized lips. So this is like a ventriloquist that can't ventriloquize its dummy, because there's a gap. And this is what I understand to be the Lacanian real. So it's indices, and that happens when the signifier and the object are separated. And interesting things happen as you separate them further and further. Different things happen. You go into the realm of fantasy, or you begin to see what your expectations are. but you still don't know if it's true, and this is called Accident Time by the dramatist I wrote about. And then you can also figure tragedy and comedy on the graph, because
It's quite a very helpful graph.
yeah,
No, I mean, I guess what I would be curious about would be, how does that in some way link with this sort of scenario around this dimensionality?
yeah.
What I mean, or maybe a different way of asking the question is, in what way does that sort of grid stroke graph or you know, diagram here allow one to make sense of the world? So, because what we were saying before, the way in which we ended up on, you know, the groundless ground, and the question of the surface, and the surface was reality, and reality was how we sort of locate everything. Would you say that this is like a more, you know, like, let's say we're now looking much more zooming in on the on these this generic surface called reality, and then we're zoomed in to come up with this kind of
Why? I think culture kind of, and this explains the groundless grounds, that symbols and icons are groundless because they represent things that aren't there.
they get detached from their original
And sometimes an icon can be mistaken for an index. So with a trompe l'oeil, you're looking at an icon, but you think you're having a physical relationship with it. You think you're in relationship in space to it, but you're not. And I think that describes the notion of the hyperreal, when things have got, you've kind of
Okay. So we got jouissance on there, we got castration.
and the voice and the word. The voice is here, so this is the sort of speaking. It's, Lacan says it describes the advent of the speaking being, but it does a lot more than that, I think. I think you can say that comedy is what happens when the signifier, it finally hits the body here, and you realise that it's wrong, or that it doesn't add up with physicality.
I mean, I can see that as an interesting graph there. I mean, I guess my irritation always with Lacan is I just can't bear the fact that on the one end is jouissance and the other end is castration, you know, this kind of thing. I just think that it just annoys me. I find it sexist or whatever the word is.
But I think if you understand castration as a signifier that has no object, or something that you think is true, that you expect to be there, but it isn't.
But
and
the
so
thing is, it's not a neutral word. It's a word that says castration, which means cut off testicles. And therefore, it seems to me that they're invoking this kind of moment where you just want to squeeze your legs together, whether or not you're male or female, because that is going to bring in this fear. And the thing that I find annoying about Lacan is that that often he will then just brush this aside. No, I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use this word that invokes all this meaning culturally,
Yeah.
and in fact is going to just say, really what I mean is just sort of getting rid of something and substituting for something else, or it's not really showing itself to be really what it is.
Well, it shows you, you can kind of understand fetishism in relation to it.
Well, yes, but I mean, I can understand fetishism irrespective of castration. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you can't ever have castration, but I'd like to use the word in relation to castration. Or that's what, again, the whole question of the lack and so on. I mean, I find, that just drives me mad, because usually lack then is connected to female, and then there's the whole thing of denial. No, I don't mean really females, I just mean some other thing called female. And it just gets a headache for me.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's
I think
just
we use these terms because we have to sort of see it through Freud's eyes. So
I'm quite
Freud.
interested about but yeah, in the logical, the logical sense where he says unmaniacal castration, because that's like the cutting of the cord.
Yes,
So that's not the sort of gentle castration. And I
but they're
suppose-
never talking about biblical, or what was it?
Yeah, probably not talking about. I don't know, but I suppose I just think that's the notion of the umbilical castration is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So,
But I think you're right that when you use terms, one term I hate that kids use all the time nowadays is frame.
Is
Oh,
what?
Frame.
I've
Where
never
you
heard
go
that,
on,
but then I don't have kids.
you will know this, Frank, surely. Is it used in America where
Maybe.
somebody goes onto someone's Facebook account and writes something and then they pretend they're that person and then kids put online, oh, you just framed me. And my daughter used it all the time and I don't say that, it's horrible. In fact, when I phoned up Apple and said
Wow.
that my phone had been hacked, he said, oh, you've been framed? And when I told him what had happened, he was like, oh, I must apologise. And he said 100 times, I must apologise for using that term. And I thought, yeah, you shouldn't have used the term actually at all as an employee, because it's just, to me, it's so horrible. It's like putting rape and Facebook together. It's just, but it's
Wow.
a really
Never
common
heard of
term.
that.
Teenagers use it all the time.
Wow.
And I think that using terms that evoke, like castration is horrible to me, evoke,
But it does describe what it does.
but then so does rape. You know, I have taken your personality and I have said, usually it's really innocent, it's things like, oh, I'm the best daughter of so-and-so, or, you know, my boyfriend loves me kind of thing. It's that kind of thing that they do. But it's still a term that evokes violence, and it evokes violence against, sexual violence against somebody, I think, is sort of.
Yeah, we do.
Not because I want to say both fields, but I think that
Not because you want what?
to say both fields, both sides of the.
Uh-oh.
of the
You're going to
but
sit
I
on the
think
fence.
Things that you just said about the implication of the word are precisely the problem of carrying with us a paradigm or a picture of dimensions that doesn't correspond, or that at least we have not questioned to start with. So the fact that it brings in all these sexual elements and it applies it to a completely different environment. It's in this case it's far heavier than you can mention plain skeuomorphism, but it is still applying a picture of the world to something, therefore repeats that picture, and that picture is ultimately political. So the dimensions we are discussing, although we started off with apparently geometrical dimensions, have this problem that when you keep these distinctions going, and in this case, the politics is also there between Jewish sense of desire and the limitation of it, or to just dividing the body and the voice as a pre-given. Are giving us the world really packaged in a certain way. You will shop on your free time, and then you will watch TV or play with Facebook. You won't do something else. These kind of things are dimension coming set in as the horizon of the world we are living in. That's why it's very important, it's very, very important to question the notion of dimension.
Okay. I mean, I think that was very interesting, though. I always think it's important to have this broader sense. So what was your other side? So you're taking...
No, I mean, that was bring it together because I lost it, sorry.
Okay. We're almost at the hour, so what I want to do... Kate, thanks. I mean, you can stay up there if you want. What I'd like to do is to figure out now, are you happy with where we are in dimension, or are you just absolutely like a splitting headache on this? Shall we move on from this, or are we just at the beginning of it? I'm not sure, because not everybody really participated as full, and I just don't want to leave people behind, but maybe this is something you just want to mull on and not get into. What do you think?
I have more questions.
You have more questions? Well, what might be appropriate, I'm not saying it is, but what might be appropriate is to repeat the seminar. And this time have people actually give more to the story. I mean, I think that if we start with your rotating spheres. And maybe Kate, your questions of jouissance and so on, because I think that this is not outside of the realm. I'm just thinking that one of the things that might be useful to read is the first chapter in Leotard's Analytic Sublime. It strikes me that that's where it's going to take you. I could be wrong about that. What do other people think?
Yeah, I was going to mention it.
The Analytic
Actually,
Sublime.
Sublime, in Leotard's sense, does sort of relate to
Well,
what's
it crosses over
on
this
in-
whole thing. There's this cross loop. Mattia, what do you?
No, I'm happy. It is quite central to what
So
I'm
who would like to present again? Shall we draft Jacob and Grace into doing the third dimension?
In their absence.
In their absences, of course. How would you like to speak about atmosphere?
Is that a question like how would I,
No.
or if I would like?
Would you like?
Um,
Please will you speak about atmosphere and
Yeah.
see if you can connect it to dimension?
Yeah, can I have 2 weeks time?
We're going to keep this on forever? Yes, of course.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Just because I'll do my IELTS exam on
Oh, yeah, that's right,
Saturday,
doing your IELTS,
and
yeah.
I don't want to rush.
Yeah, sure, okay. Anybody else want to take it? Dane, do you want to try the third
Some
dimension?
more Einstein's time travel.
Yeah, let's do some time travel. Let's do some time travel. Let's do the dimension of time, the arrow of time. What I'm trying to get you to think about, guys, is the way in which a dimension operates as a surface. Do we need first, second, third, or are we way out of that? Or not? Where does this, we have yet to finish the last chapter in Groundless Grounds. I think we'll never finish. He'll. So if you want, you take up Groundless Grounds for next week, the last chapter.
The only problem is we're presenting on Friday, and
Oh.
I might be kind of busy.
Stuart,
Sorry, what?
can you do Groundless Grounds?
The
Chapter
last,
5?
Yeah, what sort of summarises and, yeah.
Because I think that will make the closure. So we'll have Lauren redo your thing. Do you have any suggestions that people should look at to get this rotating globe
Okay.
donut thing?
I could send her some web links because she often has like some articles online. But the problem there's she's a bit annoyed as well. But there's some I can send you some web links to the.
Yeah, why don't we send a web link or two to the rainbow and the worm? I think that the first chapter in Leotard's Analytic of Sublime would be useful. I think that in Leibniz, what did you really look at? Did you look at Chatham's view of Leibniz?
This next, there is a beautiful lecture about simplicity or complexity, depending on which one is the other side of the coin the same, which is actually on the Dropbox. It's an hour-long lecture. It's a video
By whom?
lecture by China.
He's great. This guy is fantastic.
And then he explains simplicity and the base of algorithm in another book I haven't read yet, or an article, where he is really saying that this is beyond the importance of Occam razor, because it's explaining how it works. But I haven't yet read it, so I can't really say what it
So
is
I
about.
think okay, let's see if we can structure the seminar this way. So we'll have a base read of the Analytic of Sublime, just so you have a sense of what it's about. I think Chaitan's, Greg Chaitan's video,
Mhm.
to just get a sense of what the word algorithm means in relationship to this thing's surface. Then we'll move into your recap of time travel, okay? And eventually, we'll lay the groundwork for Groundless Grounds. We'll end up with that. And then that'll open the thing up for Alberto and Jakob and Grace to finally do third dimension. 2 weeks' time. So they're not here to defend themselves. Yeah? Sound good? Great, thanks. That's good. Enjoyed that. I don't know. And please eat up these goodies that Samira brought.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good.